The local ABC affiliate is meeting up with me to do an interview.
So, yeah, from Oregon, huh?
Well, I didn't actually grow up in Oregon, that's just where I started.
Yeah. You do that too?
Hi, my name is Will Buchanan. I'm walking all the way across the country to New Hampshire in search of more freedom on a project called the Walk for Liberty. Today is November 9th, 2008, day 186. Yesterday I had an unusual experience when I was walking. There was a guy up ahead of me taking pictures of me as I approached. I had called and left messages with a couple local newspapers earlier in the day, telling them which way I was heading. So I thought perhaps it was a reporter from one of the papers who had caught up with me to interview me. However, it turned out to be a Free State Project early mover named Jerry who had come out to meet me. They haven't completely moved from their Pennsylvania home though, and had been following my progress for a couple weeks as I was getting closer to them. Jerry's wife Barbara calculated her best guess of where she thought I would be based on the GPS coordinates that I post at the end of every video. And even though we're about a week behind in processing and uploading videos as of this recording, and despite the fact that we had also taken off a day recently, her prediction turned out to be extremely accurate, and thus Jerry was able to meet me on the road. They invited us to dinner and to stay at their place that night. Their house was modeled after a church, which they had previously lived in, but unfortunately had burned down. They decided to rebuild it though, only this time with twice the volume of the original structure. They did all the work themselves and built it using 5-pound styrofoam Lego style blocks, which were then reinforced with rebar and concrete. The views from the tower were also quite impressive.
Found out. It's interesting.
No idea. Yeah, because there's our tank, we just have it delivered. And I don't think there's any way to
Well,
get it out of there.
Barbara is a podiatrist and gave me a foot checkup as well as helping me out with a problem with one of my orthotics. They also helped arrange the interview with the local ABC TV crew, which you saw earlier. During dinner, a story came up about a guy who had had a bad breakup with his girlfriend. The girlfriend found out somehow that he had received an email from someone in the Netherlands containing an image which the federal government considers child pornography. The girlfriend's sister had a connection to somebody at the FBI. So to hurt him, the girlfriend had her sister get in touch with her FBI contact to tell them about the alleged child porn on his computer. The FBI came and stole his computer, and now he's serving a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence for possession of child pornography. Because it's such a touchy subject, and because it doesn't directly relate to the point I'd like to make, I don't really want to address the topic of child pornography specifically. Other than to say that just because the federal government considers something child pornography doesn't mean that it is. I've heard of cases in which a mere drawing of a child which could have been completely created from imagination, was considered child porn. Which is absolutely ridiculous, since no children were actually victimized by the creation of that drawing. Anyway, back to the story. The first problem I have is that he clearly didn't harm any children. His only so-called crime was receiving an email from someone on his computer which contained an image file. And even if he immediately deleted the email after he received it, he probably didn't realize that the image was still stored in a cache somewhere on his computer. That's just a word to the wise if you receive any email attachments from people. But besides the fact that he didn't actually harm any children, the second problem I have with the case is that victimless crime law was able to be used by someone to punish him for something completely unrelated. My guess is that in cases in this country in which people commit victimless so-called crimes, such as prostitution, building a house on your own property without getting a permit from the government, taking or selling illegal drugs such as marijuana, or even not wearing your seatbelt, that the vast majority of people are not discovered and are therefore not kidnapped by the government. Which is fine, except for the fact that they're constantly living in fear that they might get caught. The problem is that someone else can use their knowledge of that person's victimless crime against them, either by blackmailing them or to punish them for something else completely unrelated. So in those cases, the person is effectively not being punished for the victimless crime itself, but rather another person is using the force of government to gain control over that person, and possibly using that force of government through the victimless crime to punish them for something else completely. Do you think it's right that people should be able to use the force of government to gain control over other people at their whim? The thing is that there are so many laws, you can't possibly know them all. You're almost certainly guilty of breaking some kind of victimless crime law every day, probably without your knowledge. And all it takes is for someone else to convince someone in a position of power to prosecute you for it. The answer, of course, is a simple, albeit quite challenging one. Eliminate all victimless crime laws to remove that source of people's power over others. I walked about 13.4 miles for Liberty today, and here are my GPS coordinates. If you appreciate what we're doing to spread the message of freedom on the Walk for Liberty, then please consider contributing to our work by donating at donate.walkforliberty.com. This is Will Buchanan, signing off. Well, if all goes as planned, he'll be stopped this coming January.